This is the second meetup of a very recently resurrected group that had been around for a while and gone inactive, and now we've got two, I think, dedicated organizers. We hope to have this, be some kind of regular thing. We'll see what you all are interested in. We'll see how much good content we have, and we'll wind up meeting somewhere between monthly and quarterly, and maybe somewhere in the middle. If you have ideas, if you'd like to present. It can be anything from your, pet subject in the field that you actually have a full-on presentation in, or it can just be something cool that you're working on, or even just here's my favorite collection of visualizations on subject X. As long as it's not kitten photos from YouTube, that might work out well. Again, thank you all for coming. Thanks very much to McKinsey for providing us with this beautiful space and the spread and back. Having good sponsors for events like this makes all of that possible. And smart people to volunteer to present. We have a couple of presenters who work with McKinsey as well, and to be part of the audience. So thank you all. Basic logistics. There is a little kitchen back here if folks would like. I know the good stuff's back here, but if you'd like water, soft drinks, it's all just right here through this blue entryway. And then restrooms are back past where you entered. Keep going, and they're on the left. Okay. Critical items to get out of the way. So I am just going to do a little warm-up.
Christian?
Yes.
Sorry, bathroom?
Yes.
They need badges to get in, so...
To the bathroom?
Yeah. Yeah, so we have... Here, we'll leave two up here. If you need them.
Okay.
And women's is actually on this side, right?
Women's is right here. Men's,
so women's is here.
Women's is here, and men's is
all the way around that way.
Well, you can speak to
exactly. There's access doors. So what she was just saying is there's an access door in the way. So if you want to go grab one of these employee badges here in the corner, and you can wave it at the reader. Sorry, I didn't realize that. Yeah, bathroom passes. Excellent. So I'm just going to warm us up because none of the people who have graciously volunteered to present tonight should have to go first, and get all of you guys warmed up and ready to go. I'm going to start you with some eye candy. I'm just going to show you a series of visualizations that you'll be very familiar with the general concept. They use the same data. They work off of the same visualization paradigm using a very common shape that everybody recognizes instantly. And then a set of subshapes that everybody will recognize instantly. But the story that they tell with the same data set and the same shapes and the same visualization model winds up going off in very different directions. We'll run you through them real quick. Oops, that's the wrong one. So here we have it, 332 electoral votes for Barack Obama. And, this is the basic. This tells you Republican, Democrat, and a state, a geospatial coordinate. That's all it gives you, but it tells you who won the election. Does the job, and it's the one we all see. But if you actually want any insight about why did they win the election, what does America actually look like other than these big, huge color blocks, it doesn't do much for you. This one, I think, in a way, from 538, tells you more. Because following the blue and red, you can actually follow how many states were how far above the median line. Obama, you can get the margin out of it. And so it's very seductive. Everybody goes for the big map. They want to show states. And yet, if you're looking for insight, sometimes a simple chart will do even better. So here's where, your first step on the road to figuring out, so what do these big blocks on the map actually mean? This is population. And eventually, very quickly you start being like, there isn't just a giant, group of red states being dominated by these tiny little blue states on the coasts. This starts to make a little more sense. Here's the Times stab at that, doing a cartograph. They're more or less showing you a national map, but they're just using simple squares to give you, to give you the representations of population size. This works well. It just takes you out of that, that familiar map paradigm. It's also programmable, so they can do it dynamically on the fly. That's one of the big virtues of that. Here's another interesting version from USA Today. They wanted to represent, the population size, the number of electoral votes that you get out of each state, and they just did it with these dots. It's effective. It keeps you within the, the geospatial coordinate system that you're familiar with, but gives you some impression of how population is factoring into the whole thing. So these guys, this is a little hard to see. Looks at the little remote control thing for the lights is in one of those cabinets. If you could bring down the lights, or there's a manual control. Yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you. So this is the same data, but these guys are trying to tell the story that America isn't red, America isn't blue, it's purple. So they're using a continuous palette of colors, which, yeah, it makes the case America is purple. There are some states that are a little redder, some states that are a little bluer. But it doesn't, for me at least, it doesn't tell me much. It's more about this emotional idea that America is purple. To me, it's not very insightful. And so you lose something, with this. On the one hand, sometimes a continuous tone palette from one color to another is revealing, and at other times, I think in this case, it's obfuscating. It's hiding, what insights there are. This is a good example of just drilling down further. In this case, you start to get the counties. So you're seeing which counties were won by each candidate. And you can start to make out, okay, this is a little more complicated than it looks at first when you just have the states, the big blocks. You can start to make out, like, these states down here are red states, and yet there's very clearly this big band of blue going right through there. And that band of blue, if you start looking into geography and demographics, will reveal some very interesting things about who's voting for who in which states, in which context. To me, this one's still a little ugly. I like this one. Gives you the same stuff, but just a little more subdued. And with the county boundaries, which it's interesting. You go back and forth. It's like, well, which one is actually easier to read? That one's from, I think, USA Today. They did some really nice charts. This is another version. This is kind of the hybrid of the two. This is the purple America meets counties. And again, you can glean some of the same insights, but I think that the continuous color palette, particularly without the lines between the counties, actually winds up obscuring, makes it hard to read, makes it hard to pick out the most interesting data points. There's just a states overlay, which makes it a little easier to lock in, but not a lot. There we go. This is where I think it starts to get interesting. This is the Times, of course. This is where they've redivided it. You've got county granularity, but they've said, no, let's stick with blue, let's stick with red, and we'll just use saturation, of the blue and of the red to give you a sense of, the vote count and of how decisively a given county went for each candidate. And I think at this point, it's both easy to make out these big patterns, like the blue belt through the South here. If I'm a Republican strategist, these states here worry me a lot. And at the same time, though, you're still, the eye can, I think, interpret more readily the clear distinction between the red and the blue, rather than a continuous tone of purple. I think it gets lost in that. This is just another variation on that. And again, I think going back and forth, I can follow. Oh, this one actually, this is a threshold. So if you go back and forth between these two, this one is sort of continuous tone purple. And just catching up. And this one is threshold. So you get blue for over 70% Democrat and red for over 70% Republican. And then the purple are the areas that can actually make a claim to being in the middle. That can actually make a claim to being swing counties. And all of a sudden, the country looks very polarized when you start to threshold like that. You start seeing these areas of just intense red throughout much of the country, and then you see these islands of blue, which, not coincidentally, happen to be where the huge population centers are. And then if you take that and you rescale it for population, you get what I call the blue islands in a sea of lava. But it gives you a sense that it's very hard. It's hard to relate to, right? We're expecting the map. We're expecting America. We're expecting this very familiar shape. But you can start to make out, after you stare at this and let your eyes go, defocus a bit, you can start to make out that, wow, these population centers, mostly on the edges, are actually really huge chunks of this map, are really huge chunks of the population. And the red, there's a lot of it going all through the country, but it's more spread out. It's in these and it flows together. It's really interesting to me how the blues are really such islands, and with all around them these barrier zones, these intertidal zones of purple, and then a whole lot of red filling in the gap in between. So anyway, that's your warm up. Actually, two more visualizations that I thought were kind of interesting. This one is also from the Times. They wanted to show the change from 2008 to 2012. And instead of just using a simple color model, they made these little arrows. And the length of the arrow tells you the amount of the change. So it's blue for moving in the Democrat direction. And notice these areas that I said a Republican strategist should be worried about down here in the Solid South. And then red everywhere else, which is mostly the midterm phenomenon, or the re-election phenomenon. A president, in general, is going to lose some of his vote the second time around. And I think that's a nice way of doing it. And then this one, also from the Times, that this is the amount by which. This is an interesting hybrid. So there's one dot for every county, and they're showing you the amount above the midline for each county. So you see, again, the huge population centers are huge dots, and they're very blue. And then there's a lot of red dots, but they're much smaller dots, because the populations that they represent are much smaller. So anyway, that's my political junkie indulgence for the evening. Thank you very much, and now we're going to start with Greg Irwin, the CEO of BigTwist.com, a startup here in the city, and he can tell you far better than I can what interesting stuff they've got on offer.
All right, thanks a lot, Christian. See if we can get this up and running, and I'm thrilled to have the chance to show you what we've been working on. So again, thank you to Christian. Big Twist, we founded it about a year ago. I have 20 years experience creating presentations for sales, product management. I was an investment banker years ago, so whether I'm presenting financial models or product specifications, the one constant through my life has basically been PowerPoint. And PowerPoint is pretty remarkable. Presenting here at McKinsey, I think probably at least a couple of you have similar experiences. It's the single constant vehicle to communicate ideas within companies. And what's remarkable is, PowerPoint's 30 years old. It predates the internet. It predates mobile as we think of mobile. Yet it's the mainstay in terms of communicating information. So I teamed up with some partners, and we thought to ourselves, well, perhaps there's a better way. I mean, what can we do to change the model in terms of communicating information, to take advantage of cloud-based services and, of course, mobile. And what you're seeing here basically is our shot at that. Now, I ask your patience because we are, this is alpha code, so expect some burps and blips, but okay. And then the key for me, the one thing I'd love to get from this is your feedback. So based on what we show, if you see something you like, see something you don't like, please find me afterwards and tell me. We're going into beta in the next couple months, and I'd love for as many of you as possible to sign up for to register as a beta. Okay, so Ben Franklin, when we think about it, for the most part, people don't like creating presentations, and I don't think people like attending presentations all that much. This evening aside, I'm sure. And the question is why? I mean, obviously there's the issues of stage fright and such, but from the audience's perspective, I think it's a question of engagement. I think Ben Franklin here describes it well. The presentations, when you're sitting at a PowerPoint, it's one of the few times during your day where you're really expected to sit on your hands and listen and really take a one-way flow of information. And I think that that's not really natural and necessarily the best way for people to learn. So one of the key aspects of our Big Twist application is to build in interactivity at the core. So it's cloud-based, and the way it works is you would log in from your browser or from your smartphone and access the presentation through a link as if you were going to a website that you're invited to. And then that's your private version of the presentation that you can manipulate and deep dive into where you want to find more information. You go at your own pace. So rather than having to listen to me speak in a in a one-dimensional way, what I think you would all probably prefer is to have your version of this presentation on your smartphone. And you'd probably run ahead in some parts, you might go back in some parts. You might want to dig in on some parts. And then once you kind of absorbed it at your own pace, then I think you'd be ready to maybe ask a question or get a clarification on it. Now, in terms of the overall opportunity, there's 750 million downloads of PowerPoint. And when you think about how many times you're listening to a PowerPoint and you're checking Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, there's natural inefficiency and lack of productivity. So I think that this is a big challenge and a big opportunity to basically improve productivity in Google presentations. Okay, so the origin here is, and I'm sorry, but you can see here, this is our scene strip. I should be able to hide it, but I don't want to mess with it. Oh, yeah. Wait, let me see. Okay, that's okay. So the basis of PowerPoint is basically slides, and slides are basically a digital representation of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, which really isn't that convenient for interactivity. So then with an iPad, you get flexible information space and overall attendee interaction. The other big thought that we're driving towards is it doesn't need to be static slide by static slide. So there's a certain amount of chunk of information that you can actually absorb at any period of time, but that doesn't necessarily need to be represented in a 2D environment from slide to slide. So what we have here is actually, this is a 3D video game called Unity 3D, and it's actually a 3D information space. So we need to show text and images, perpendicular to the viewer so you can read it and understand it. But actually, it's a 3D information space that you can rotate around and position information in any way. I love the visualizations that Christian showed. What I would like better than anything is for the average business professional to be able to create those and present those. And that's the challenge. I think that those visualizations actually are pretty hard to put together. There are some applications that are out there that take a good shot at democratizing, making it accessible to average professionals. But for the most part, if you have to put together a presentation, you'll probably defer back to text, some images, and then basically work on your pitch and give it your best shot. So being able to deploy this information in an active 3D space is, again, one of the aspirations that we've got. So as we dove into this, we realized there's a basic natural dichotomy. Tufte, who I assume given this crowd is somewhat familiar with, and then the presentation guru is the Steve Jobs, basically presentation as a prop. And so, for those who don't know, presentation as a prop basically says put something static, don't make it that rich, because you really want the audience to be paying attention to the speaker. Tufte, on the other hand, says, wait a minute, this is a big square of information where you communicate your information, and data density is a real problem. So you need to improve your data density and basically get the kind of charts the person was shown. And that's a natural dichotomy, particularly when we look at the research, more and more people are giving presentations remotely. So it's not in a setting like this where you have my full charisma to keep you interested. There you have email, you have Facebook, and you have 1,000 distractions. So there it's more important for the content to actually be accessible and interesting. And that's, again, what we're trying to aspire to do. To balance, to walk this line, I think it's a pretty big line between Tufte and Duarte and Reynolds. Okay, so I am going to show you a little bit of the widgets that we've got. Our approach to democratizing this information is to provide information widgets that very simply basically follow basic information structures. So this is a carousel that you would just download and populate just like you populate any slide. And what's nice about it is it's a new way to show basically a group of information. So here are 5 different information structures, a list, a group, whether you want to add detail, whether you want to compare or provide contextual information. Those are the 5 models that we basically follow when we create our widgets. So when we go to the group. So in the context of groups, one of the group-like widgets is the carousel. It's one way to show 5 objects, or as many objects as you want, in relationship to one another. For context, or let me do detail. So here's an example of detail. Here you have scene tabs that basically provide additional information. So on the one hand, you can keep your basic scene clean, but then if the user wants to dig in to get more information, there's scene tabs available for them. So we have about a dozen or so of these widgets that we're creating that people can very easily use, populate, and basically present information in a little bit more dynamic ways. And at the end of the day, put it in the hand of the audience so that the audience can explore the information at the level that they choose. Okay, so I've just got one more. This is our 3D scatter plot. So we're not a data viz company as like a Tableau, but we are interested in how you might use 3D to basically show information in different ways. And so this is a pretty simple scatter plot that basically you can rotate and explore to get more information. And I think my ideal actually is not to create these on our own, but to work with people like Tableau so that they can be imported, and then you can provide context through text, these widgets, or images to provide additional information onto those charts that you might build out of Tableau. And all of this is web service based, so it's pretty straightforward to plug in a Tableau chart for teams. So I've been speaking in one direction for probably too long. This is a smart and interesting crowd, so I'm curious to have conversations with you afterwards about how you might imagine using this to solve the problems that you deal with every day. Thank you very much for your time. Go to Big Twist, Twitter, Big Twist Pres. I'll take any questions, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Anybody have any general questions that are good for the
charging or not charging for this?
Oh, so it's free. This is a free service, and our expectation is that we'll keep it free for at least a year, build up a base, understand really what it is, where the value is, and then we'll add in a premium subscription at some point.
How did you generate the 3D?
Well, this is a 3D environment. So we're using a 3D video game engine, actually, called Unity 3D. And we place 3D objects. So every object you saw there was actually a 3D object, or in some case, textures on the face of the object.
So is this a substitute for PowerPoint, effectively? It's a cloud-hosted presentation tool, essentially?
Exactly, yes. Now, and our expectation is you would upload your PowerPoint into it, so if you want to take your content, you would populate it. So I see my player crashed. Really, that's proof it is now. Yeah, you'd upload your objects. So if you have PowerPoint presentations, as I'm sure everybody does, you'd populate them in there, and then you'd be able to add in interactive widgets or any kind of 3D models that you might choose.
And so your audience could explore those 3D data spaces on their own while you're presenting, which is fascinating.
One thing we learned was it can be distracting and inappropriate to have people navigating while you're trying to explain. So that's pretty simple. It's lock, unlock. So when I'm ready and I want people to explore on their own, I unlock it and I let them explore. When I really want their attention, I lock it up, and it's just like they're watching a movie.
So I'm curious what kind of feedback you've gotten from people who tried to start authoring stories through these widgets, and how they've employed them in different ways, or just sort of the uses that they found for them.
It's a learning curve because people are pretty well hardened into thinking in the concepts of bullets and chunking in bullets. But I think that with a little bit of training, actually, we have probably 3 or 4 list-like modes to share or lists of information. It's actually pretty easy, and I think we have 5 alpha customers who are using it now. They're pretty fluid because they're simple. They're albums, they're carousels, we call them the rotating dots. We've got a handful of them. They're pretty straightforward. But one of our challenges is training people to share information in different ways. It's a big hurdle.
What industries are the 5 clients with?
Actually, one of our most interesting is selling toenail fungus. Is a over-the-counter ointment, and they're a small company, and they go and they take this out to present to Rite Aid and CVS and their distributors. We have another company that's a real estate development. We have another company that does presentations for other clients. So we have a mix.
Did you have a target market in mind when you started this?
We did, and but we're realizing that we may not have been right. So I want to open it up and through this process, find out where the hotspots are.
Cool.
So if I put PowerPoint into, or uploaded PowerPoint, I'm just trying to figure out how long it would take for someone who's new to this to have something ready to present. Is this like a ritual process, or is something that people will just naturally fall into? Because
So the actual mechanics of uploading a PowerPoint are basically instantaneous. Now we don't have that built, but we've done our prototype. We know that they're basic open source translators from PowerPoint into OpenOffice, which is the same format. The issue we found actually is it's hard to create a good story and to do a decent storyboard and to communicate with clients. And I think that what we're trying to do is provide more tools to make that easier. So I don't think it would take any longer for you to create a great story with Big Twist versus other tools. But we're hoping that with the additional tools at your disposal, you'll be able to create something a little more engaging.
You alluded to it just there, and I'm glad you did. It's been my experience that people in general are poor at communicating, and that the tooling is never the problem, but in some cases, it's the thing that makes people less able to communicate. PowerPoint is a great example where you're locked into a large font and you're going to bulletize everything. And I'm wondering if, well, if you believe that too, and if you do you believe that there's something perhaps on the front end of creating what will become the visuals for a presentation that's as important, if not more important, than the actual visuals?
There is. 100% I agree. Because I've put together a lot of presentations. And I've sat through a lot of terrible presentations. And it very rarely was a function of the tool. I think often it was, mostly because PowerPoint's pretty complicated. From the chart option, you have 160 different click paths from the chart. So I think it's just become loaded and serves everybody. So I think that there's an opportunity to cut it down to basics so that people can spend less time fiddling and more time thinking about the storyboarding. I think there's a great opportunity for a great storyboarding tool. That's a touchy subject as well. People have their creature comforts in terms of how they like to do it. But yes, generally I think there's an opportunity. Christian, how are we doing for time?
Good shape.
Okay.
Take one or
Any
two.
more?
Do you have like a backup plan in case you arrive where you're going to do a presentation and there's no internet, or it's just
Yes.
on internet?
Yeah, we don't have it yet, but it's pretty straightforward. It's a local build. It's a local app, basically. So you'd be logged in. The problem is if you lose internet connection, then you're no longer networked in. So with a lot of things that you typically want to do with your web conference, like your chat, we have a note-taking tool that we're speccing out. Those are the kinds of things you want to have access to.
Are you familiar with Pixar?
Yes. Right.
What about making your components add on the PowerPoint itself?
We've thought about that actually, because it probably it'd be nice to be able to just access 750 million people. So we thought about that quite a bit. The downside is you're pretty well locked in. When you're a plug-in to PowerPoint, there's really not a great opportunity to add a lot of value. In fact, I think ThinkCell is the only one I can think of where a plug-in that adds a lot of value on top of PowerPoint. So we have thought about it, but we felt like we really couldn't break the mold in any significant way. Why don't I wrap it there? Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you very much, Greg. Oscar Villarreal is going to take over. That's pretty cool. I was trying to, walk that line between, overpronouncing and underpronouncing. Oscar works at McKinsey, does a lot of cool stuff, big JavaScript hacker, and a fantastic framework that's being used by a lot of people for visualizations, including a bunch of the stuff that I just did, a lot of the election stuff, was rendered using D3.js by Mike Bostock. So Oscar is going to show us some cool stuff with D3. Similarly, particularly focused on maps, because you can take, you can convert your maps of anything you want down to SVG elements, and then have D3 be the interaction and population and data richness layer on top of that.
Just give me 1 second.
Oscar, I think that one's fine. This one's short.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Okay, all set. So I'm going to be live coding here. I'm going to sit down if you don't mind. Hopefully everything will be fine. So yes, make a map of any country in D3.js as fast as possible. As Christian said, I worked at McKinsey. I've been here for 2 years, and I'm in charge of coding a lot of the stuff that we do. I work crazy hours, and if I can go fast, it's good for me because I get to not work 2 minutes. That's always good. Okay, so I was born and raised in Mexico. I've been here for about 5 years. I really love Rockland. I've been to Rockland at least a couple of years. And I code in JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and I'm starting to learn a little bit of Python, which is pretty cool. So what stuff are we going to need to build this country map? So we're focusing only on the browser for now. And we're going to use, of course, our data source, which is probably one of the most complicated things when you're trying to make a map, is getting the right data for that map, which is typically in a .shp format file, which is a shapefile, which from what I read is pretty standard for showing maps. We're going to use open source software because open source is cool, and we're going to do Quantum.js, which will grab that shapefile and convert it into another format called GeoJSON. Now, GeoJSON is what the library D3.js uses to just read from it and spit out a map in SVG. Now, I'm throwing a lot of technical terms here. I'm not sure if everyone is technical. If you have any questions regarding anything, please just interrupt. This is still a meetup, so it's cool. SVG is preferred over Canvas, in my personal opinion, for drawing maps, because every single element of the map is part of the DOM. So that means that you can bind events to it a lot more easier. You can put stuff like click events or hover events into it. Also, you can style it with CSS. So if you already know that it's CSS, it helps you out to make the map that you want. And D3 allows you to data bind your visualization. What does that mean? It means that you have a huge set of data, and you're going to somehow grab some values of that data and glue them together with parts of the SVG visualization. So D3 does that by 3 methods, which is called the enter, update, and exit, which basically means that you enter the visualization with a certain amount of data, you update it as the user interacts with the visualization or new data comes in, and you exit and remove data as you continue. So for instance, the stuff that we saw with the map of USA and the whole election stuff, right? You could most likely use D3.js with that if you can connect to the server, maybe via WebSockets, and bring the information back and just keep updating. It'll work pretty nicely. So, okay, onto the code, and hopefully this will work out. Okay, so the first thing we need is our data source, and we're going to get that data from Diva. Awesome. Now, I have all these links in the presentation. I'm going to upload them at the end to the meetup group if anyone's interested, and the code is going to be in GitHub. So Diva, so far for me, has given me all the data I need for the kinds of projects I worked on. You can get pretty detailed data about any country, if not every single country. It's pretty sweet. It gives you the format in .shp, which is exactly what we need. And to prove this, we're going to grab the country of Azerbaijan, which is kind of weird for visualization, not very common. If it was the States, you could probably just Google, GeoJSON USA and get the top. And we're going to do the administrative areas. So, okay, so we click OK, and then here. And this is kind of like the final product of what we're looking for. A map of Azerbaijan, which is divided into all of its states. Yes. Okay, cool. So let's download this. And let's create a folder called How many people here are developers, by the way? Okay, for everyone else, I'm sorry. This is pretty cool stuff once you get through it. Okay, cool. So that was downloaded. I have it in automatically unzip. And if you see, this is all the stuff that I just downloaded. On the first side, it looks like crap, right? Like, what the hell is this? But what we're interested in are the .shp files. As I mentioned, now there's 2 .shp files. There's 0 and 1. So we don't know what we're looking for, so you just click on 0. And this is when Quantum.js comes in. So Quantum.js will allow you to basically look at Azerbaijan. For you guys who are interested, here's a project. It's pretty easy to install. It's a lot more easy to install on the PC. For Macs, you're going to have to download a lot of Python plugins, but it works pretty well. Anyway, So here's a map, but this is not exactly what we're looking for, right? We had a lot of divisions of the different districts of Azerbaijan, and this is just like the flat representation of it. So what the hell happened here? Well, what happens is that we opened this guy. There's another .hp folder here. You go click that, boom, there's the guy that we want, right? Now, QGIS separates everything in layers. If you're used to Photoshop, Illustrator, Flash, whatever that uses layers, it's the same thing. QGIS allows you to do all kinds of cool stuff. You can crop certain chunks of a map. You can glue different maps together. Tons of things. Honestly, I'm not an expert on it. I just use it for my GeoJSON converter. But definitely check it out. It's open source, so it's worth it. So here we're going to do a save as, and automatically gives us the option to save as a GeoJSON format, which is sweet because that's exactly what we want. Here we have Azerbaijan. We're going to create a new folder called data. I'm going to save this as map. Okay, and boom, there we go. So close GS here. Data. Now, how does this file look like? If anyone is interested. Looks like this. Perfect. Yeah, right. So what you're seeing here is all the geo coordinates of Azerbaijan for all of its different districts. You see some properties, you got some IDs here, you got some names. Basically, there's nothing you can do with this, right? I mean, yeah, you're gonna have to do something with it afterwards, but as this, it's pretty useless. So that's where D3 comes into play. Now, let's go back to our folder. Development. Okay, let's create a typical index.html file. Let's open it. I love Sublime. If anyone's a Sublime fan, it's the best. Yes, I'm very geek. So here's our basic HTML5 application, which is what we're going to need to render. We're also going to need the library we were talking about, which was d3.js. Now, how many people here are familiar with D3? Ever heard of D3? Oh, cool, awesome. So, crap, nice. It's amazing. It's by far one of the best JavaScript libraries out there to create visualizations that I've ever played with. There's other kinds of libraries like HiCharts or JQplot, which give you pre-formatted typical charts, a bar chart, a pie chart, stuff like that. And that's pretty cool. It allows you to go fast, but you're limited to what they already built. And if you want to go out of the box, you have to go into a library, and that's just messy. D3 gives you control over every single vector that you are drawing, and that's just way cool because it allows you to do all those crazy things. Like look at this stuff right here. That's pretty cool. Definitely check it out if you're into coding and you have to do visualizations that are out of the normal. So we're going to grab the library. Just going to save it here. Right, we're going to put it here. Cool. Now, okay, we got D3. Close this up. I'm going to open it. The whole thing. We got our index file, we got our GeoJSON number thingy here working. What else do we need? So now we need the code from D3 to grab all this spaghetti stuff and convert it into Azerbaijan. So what you do there is you go to my blog. It should be up and running on the Digital Caveman. You scroll down and you will see the code here. In CoffeeScript, you're a CoffeeScript fan, or JavaScript to create Madagascar. So, copy this right here, and I'm just going to paste it. And we'll go line by line explaining what it is. Cool. So, what the hell are we doing here, right? If you're not a developer, this is still going to be nonsense, but if you are, you're probably going to correct me. Okay, so first we're going to create a few variables to hold the data that we're going to project, right? And we have first here this 3 variables path, this xy. xy has this d3.geomercator, which is the d3 library. It's the d3 object, property, geo, property, mercator. Okay, what the hell is going on here? Let's go back to our presentation and the .shp file, which I already talked about, this little explanation of what it is, where it comes from. What is a map projection in itself? Projection of the globe onto a flat map using grid lines. Okay, lat and longitude, geocoordinates, cool. What is a Mercator projection? Okay, that's spherical Mercator projection commonly used by tile mapping libraries, open layers, and leaflet. Cool, if you ever build maps, you've heard of those too. There's some issues with areas distortion, so if you're doing polar plats, it's not recommended. For this example, we're not doing that, so it still works. What does conformal mean? Preserves its angles open. Cool. Okay, so we come back and we say, okay, then what the hell is the D3 geo path projection thing? Okay, so that's going to create a new path with the default settings for that Albers projection, but we're not doing that. We're using a Mercator and some other point of radius. Okay, so from what I understand here, I'm creating my projection in XY that has this scale and translate, which right now we're just going to say, okay, give me this map in the scale of 100. And I'm going to apply that projection to all the paths that I'm going to draw of the map, okay? Third thing that we need is a container for our map. And for that, we're going to create this vis variable here, which points, selects the vis ID element. So div ID vis, boom, that's there. And it's going to append the SVG container, which is basically a container of the chart with a fixed width and attribute, fixed width of 900 and a height of 600. Okay, all is going well. So far, we're trying to pull the map of Madagascar because I copied it from my blog, which I recommend you do, but that's not what we want. We want the other map, so we're going to go into data /map.geojson, okay? And this is where it gets super cool. This is where D3 comes into the equation and starts doing all this incredible magic to generate the chart. So as I mentioned before, D3 gives you power over every single path that you draw, right? So the D3.json object property allows you to call a GeoJSON or a JSON file, and in the callback, which is this guy right here, we're saying, okay, we're going to create the SVG node. We're going to add this class, which we don't really need. We're going to select all the paths. And this is where people sometimes get confused. Because we haven't created the paths, right? Why are we going to select them if they're not there yet? But just think of it as, you know, in the future, imagine you already have them all, and you have all the paths, and you're going to want to bind the data to them, right? So that they resemble exactly what you want. A path, if someone doesn't know, you can just go to SVG path element, and here's the description of it. You can read through it. It's super interesting, yeah, right? But the interesting part of the path is this attribute here, D, which basically says, if you guys remember high school and you draw a line, you go from like x1, y1 to x2, y2. Well, that's basically what you're putting in here. You're saying move to this point and then draw a line to the other point. And those points are the geocoordinates that we have from our shapefile. And D3 is just grabbing those points and saying, okay, I'm going to draw a path between them. Cool. So that's the path. We're going to add what we said before, that path with this projection, to the D attribute, which I just explained. There's going to be a little bit of opacity. If you are a designer, you know what that means. It just means it's kind of opaque. So it's not like screaming out. The color is going to be in hex code, this color right here, and the stroke is going to be the border of the element, right? So because we're making a JSON call, we're going to have to run the local server. For this simple HTTP, I used Python. Cool, that worked. Can I run it? And then like, oh my god, not working. Well, that's not true. It's there. You just can't see it. Azerbaijan is this little guy right here. Cool. So it's there, it's minuscule, and that's it. Thank you very much. No, just kidding. Here, okay, we've managed to get it inside of the DOM, right? And we can start seeing all the paths, but it's pretty useful. So what do we have to do? So if you guys remember here, we set a scale of 100. Oh, okay, scale, you know, scaling, big, small. What happens if I go to like 400? Let me reload. Oh, see, now it looks like a little bit of a crumb there. Okay, we're doing good. Go to 600. It's starting to take shape. Let's see if we can get a cornflake out of this guy. Yeah, a little bit of a cornflake. Okay, so what you're doing here is, and this is like the part that takes out the most time, right? Figuring out the scale of the map that you're drawing. And not just that, if you see as I scale the thing up, it starts moving to the right. Because given the projection, it's showing Azerbaijan where it belongs in the world, right? And when you're scaling to the center of the world. God knows where that is. And as you scale, this compiler keeps moving over there, right? So that's where the translation comes in. And you can translate in both X and Y. So if we're moving a little bit to the right, potentially you want to move there, and then on the web, sorry, I'm talking my right. So this right is minus X and minus Y. So if you say, you know, minus 50, I'm going to say 100 or like that, we suddenly lost it, and it's somewhere out of this place. So let's go back. Let's just say 10, and it's still nowhere to be found. So now it says it's in 70x and minus 100y. Oh, okay. So it's way up there. So we got to bring it down a little bit. Minus 122. No, that didn't help out. So you're gonna keep going for a while. There it is, popped up. Awesome, top left. Okay, so long story short, this took me in all honesty like, here we go. It took me like 10 minutes to get to the right projection. I'm not lying. And in the end, you're gonna refresh, you're gonna end up with Azerbaijan. So, that's not it. We still got a bunch of things to do. Okay, so you got it here, awesome, sweet, but now what do I do? You know, so you're not just gonna look at a map. In that case, I just go to Quantum and make it, you know, look at there. Well, D3 gives you the option to interact with your elements. You can do stuff like add click events. I'll explain what this work I'm doing here is. I can't be talking type of this. Console.log. So what I'm doing here is binding a click event to all of my paths, okay? And I'm gonna have a callback function which receives D. D is this huge GeoJSON. If you see, we're going over the JSON.features property, okay? This is the features array right here, and each one of these curly bracket things is an object. So you're looping over each one of those, and that's D, okay? That's what you're gonna bring in here. And I is just an index. Every time it goes through 1, it increases by 1. So it keeps on moving. We have that in, we're going on our console, which is super cool, thank you for coming. And then if you click on it, you can see that we logged this, which is the DOM element, which is the path we were talking about, the D attribute, right? That has that move to this coordinate, yada yada. The fill opacity property, which we put in, the fill color, the stroke, 222, everything is there, super sweet. And we also have the object itself. Now, thankfully, Quantum GIS, when it grabbed all that data and exported it to GeoJSON, and added some stuff to it. It added, well, first of all, the geometry of the coordinates, which is what it's using to create the map, and it also created an ID and some other stuff within the properties. If we dig into the properties, we see that we can find the name of this place, which Christian, you know better than I do, Lemishli.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, cool. He's so smart. So by itself, you already have the name of the place, which you can probably lay on top of it. But what I really love is that you already have an ID. And this gives you the power to do whatever you want, because you can have a completely separate data set, right? And just have all the IDs of the regions within that data set, and then you can add all the different values that you want to plot. You can add sales stuff, you can add a color to it, you can do whatever you want because now you have an ID with it. You can find it now. You can map into it. So it's pretty nice to keep, in my opinion, separate data sets for separate things. In this particular case, it plays out pretty well. So not just that, because we have access to the DOM node, which is this guy right here, we can say, okay, this dot set attribute fill red. And what do you guys think that's going to do? You click it and it becomes red. It's pretty cool. You can now start to add things so that your user can interact with the map. You know, click on something and find stuff with it. Basically do whatever you want. There's one more thing that I haven't mentioned here that you always have to keep in mind. So D3 is not going to work with IE8. You have to deal with that still. Some people do, I luckily don't. There's this other thing called R2D3, which I was reading about yesterday, which uses Raphael and maps down to VML. So that will work in IE8. The size of the GeoJSON that you're bringing in, right? How heavy is this? You gotta think mobile, you gotta think all these crazy things that we gotta code for today. So, oh no, not that folder. So this guy here weighs 618K. That's a really good question. So let's try to compress it. MapShaper. There's another tool on the web called MapShaper. Whoever developed it, you are the greatest man in the world. And it's so far the easiest thing I've ever seen out there that you can slash vectors, because what you're trying to do is, how do you obtain a curve? Well, you have a lot of lines, right, that determine the curve. So each one of those lines is going to weigh. So what you do is you take those lines out and you end up with a more like squared shape. So MapShaper allows you to grab your SHP file, which we have from our raw data. Right? You can open that, and then it will start reading it, it will convert it, it will give you the map of a civilian right here. And then all you gotta do is slide this little guy right here, and you see, it converts all the way down. Pretty cool, right? It's still an alpha, so if it doesn't work, I'm sorry, it's not my fault. But I've used it a couple of times, and it's pretty damn sweet. Exported, I'm not gonna do that right now, but I do have a backup where I exported it, and I exported two different versions. One came down to 70K, and the other one to 56K. So that's pretty damn good from 618K.
You mentioned Nova, what's the performance of that?
Pretty damn good so far, as long as your file that you're reading is small enough. Sorry? Of course, you have to think of that too, right? It depends. If your map is super big, you might want to go the canvas direction, right? Because inside of the canvas, all the elements are within that object, right? They're not inside the SVG container, so it will weigh less. But if you wanted to just like a map of a country, it's a pretty good thing to do. One thing that you must keep in mind when compressing this file is that it doesn't only take out the geo coordinates, it also takes away the properties, right? So you might lose the ID, which I so much love. You might lose the name, you might lose many other things in this compression. You can compress it with Quantum, I believe too. I have no idea how. I'm very lucky in the sense that there's another group in McKinsey that just does maps. So whenever I need something like that, I give them a call and they give me exactly what I want. But if you're doing it on your own, this is a pretty good approach. I highly recommend it. And yeah, let me go back to my presentation here. Okay, so I added some cool, interesting links. Thomas Newton, Alex Rothenberg, they're not here, but they're co-workers of mine, and they were the ones that started playing around with this, and that's what got me interested. Please check out their blogs. It's some pretty cool stuff. They were using Ember, which is a JavaScript dependency framework that we were very fond with a few months back. You can download QGIS, some description of path. The solution to all the nitty-gritty crap that I was talking about of finding the scale and how to translate, I started, looking all over the place, and I found out this stuff right here. Someone basically stumbled upon the same problem that I was. How can I scale and translate faster? Or how can I just say, oh yeah, map of Libya, let me put a scale of 500 and translation, right? So this whole thing, conversation goes on. Long story short, version 3 is going to have something. So cool. We'll wait for version 3 and then we can use it. A couple more links to Jason Davies, which he was actually one of the guys that was responding to that blog post. And that's it. Thank you very much. Questions?
Yeah, questions?
Yeah.
When you export from Vue.js, what's the multi-geometry support like?
That's a very good question. I've never tried it. I just recently did JSON in the time export, so I'll have to look at it.
Well, there's a multi-geometry type of JSON.
Right.
Like you have little bits to have. So does it export with multi-geometry or?
Oh, yeah. I've exported that, I think it was a few months back, and it did add the multi-geometry to it. It was pretty good. I mean, it's still open source, so there's some things that come out kind of good. But it's pretty good. Yeah, that's
Cool, thank you. Live coding is working a high wire without a net. I've seen it crash and burn on multiple occasions. Oscar pulled it off and made it look easy. So thank you very much. Now, first, I'm going to ask, we've been going for a little less than an hour now. How many folks need a quick break before we do our last presentation? Anybody? Show of hands. Everybody's good to keep going? Then we'll keep going to our last presentation. But first, while Mark is setting up, here's the mandatory networking. Everybody on this side of the room, go that way. Everybody on this side of the room, go that way. Introduce yourself to the person next to you. Take 30 seconds, get a name, find out what brought people here, and Mark will be ready in just a second.
I know, I go this way.
Really?
How are you?
I don't know that. What should we do?
My name is Lexo.
Okay, my name is Lexo.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So I'm a Java developer.
Oh, okay.
I was working in Berlin before, and I'm just on vacation here, trying to meet people.
Excellent. Yeah, I work at McKinsey with these guys, and we're part of a design master prototyping group, so we get to play with all this fun stuff.
You're a programmer?
I'm more on the project management type of side, and we work with these guys who are programmers. We have Jeremiah and two other folks who are designers, so we definitely have a mix of talents on our team. Do you work with large teams, small teams?
I've been working in relatively small web agency.
Okay.
Reading web pages for the airport or
So these are all consumer-facing sites? These are all consumer, public-facing sites?
Yeah, most of them. Actually, my specific work was more something I would front-end tools or I was not really a programmer in my case, so it was more reporting data, looking at some tasks that could
So you're here on vacation?
Yeah, I'm on vacation here. My girlfriend just moved to Chile. She started her PhD. Let's see if I don't have a job to sustain.
Oh, okay, great.
And then I come back because it's pops work.
Right. So, what kind of job are you looking for?
Programming job.
Okay.
I can't say exactly what I want. I think I would stay in for like Java or backend programming. I've been also working on databases. And then also working with database
Well, we have some things that are growing, so think we can fix it here. If you have any other contact
Who should I
myself, or Christian.
Should I give you a card?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe I can write you and give you maybe, or look at the positions.
You'll be able to keep going after.
I printed them, I didn't know what to put them in. It's just general.
I'll email you.
More beverages, there's more food, so please stay after Mark is finished and keep talking to the person you just met and to all of the other who are here in attendance tonight. And so, without further ado, Mark is going to cover a lot of the things that we've just done. Mark is a hacker, is a designer, is a teacher, is a lecturer, and is going to fuse all of those together. And so I'll just leave it to him to explain how. Thank you for being here.
Mark, do you want lights up? Lights
Yeah, you can some lights down, that's fine.
down?
Down, but if I fall asleep. So yeah, so my name is Mark Daggett. I am actually from Kansas City. New Yorker, bought Kansas City. There's a stall and fire everywhere. But thank you, Mackenzie, for bringing me out. I, as Christian says, I sort of am the way I like to say it is like a bricklayer. Everyone know what a bricklayer is? It's like someone in France goes to a park down the street and like knocks on your door and asks if you have anything broken, and then tries to fix it with whatever's in his cart. And so I've got sort of a mixed bag of experience of a Master's of Fine Arts and self-taught programmer. And so computer visualization is just this nice mesh, when I found a lot of interest. And one of the things that I have learned in terms of being trained as a visual artist, you're often taught to get up in front of people and talk about oftentimes abstract concepts with a visual language. I mean, that's kind of what art's about, all visual art is. And that dovetails really nicely with data visualization, right? Because oftentimes what you're doing is taking very complex systems, distilling it down to an experience like a gestalt that someone can sort of in some way. So what I want to do, so here's my son, Elliot, and I. This is my official title is strategic generalist, and the company is called Human Sized. And what I'm going to be talking about is data density, which I think is oftentimes overlooked in information visualization. A lot of times, what happens is we focus on the tool set or the problem domain, but not whether or not density, whether or not the visualization itself is sort of packed full like it could be, And so Albert Einstein has the saying, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. And that's essentially what he's saying is that you should be stripping the idea down to its essential components, but not so much that you lose the idea of the problem, like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And I think that a lot of, not all, there's actually a fantastic amount of visualization going on, but there is sort of this trend of making interfaces simplistic, where what they mean to do is distill it down to its essential parts. So good visualization reduces the viewer's work. Ultimately, the goal is to create like a thought-provoking, instructional, data-dense, actionable exploration. Right? So data density is the degree at which you can compress facts and figures into your visualization and yet still leave it understood. So the phone book is a very data-dense piece of information. It's not something that you can basically show someone in the corner of their eye and get them to sort of see anything other than sort of a blur of information. So that's an example of something that is data-dense but not easily understood, right, from a very sort of haptic degree. So you don't want to overwhelm the user with data. You want to have So one of the ways you do that is by leveraging off of visual perception, traits in visual perception, or cultural backgrounds that are rooted to them. So anything that you can, any sort of secret handshake you can have with the viewer that you know they're bringing that extra information to you, then that means it's one less thing to pack into that visualization. So datedness relies on specificity and purpose. The clarity is derived through strategic editing of visual globe. Density is as much about adding as it is editing. So I go to the Coco Chanel School of Data Viz, which is get dressed and take something off. That's how I input data visualization. So this is a highly specific data dense system. It's a map. One of the things that is intrinsic about a map is that it is highly specific to the place that you're mapping. And that means that it's not very portable, right? Once you've done the map of that location, that map applies to that location, right? So it is extremely data dense, but it's sort of a one-off, right? And that's how we end up with sort of a sliding scale of other visualizations and charts and things like that that can be applied over and over and over again in multiple different ways. So this is where we get to the road to simpler. So again, simple is the idea, simpler is the thing we're trying to stay away from. So this is William Playfair. Anybody know who William Playfair is? Right. So I'm going to sit there. So William Playfair he's a very interesting individual. His father died when he was 13. He was raised by his older brother. His two older brothers were considered geniuses in their own fields, mathematics and architecture. And William, I think, I'm only projecting here, but I believe that he had this sort of desire to keep up, to make his way in the world, right? So when you're William Playfair, you have two famous brothers who are considered geniuses, then you try to keep up. And by trying to keep up, you try many different professions. These are the professions that and when you fail these professions, you become interested. And specifically what you get interested in is Priestley's chart. This is a timeline chart. And again, sort of moving back to this notion of a person who is circumspect about his position within his own familial hierarchy. You know, I'm not surprised that he would be attracted by this chart of famous people and who they knew, when they knew them, whether they were alive at the same time. So he gets interested in the concept of the timeline. When you're interested in visualization but don't collect enough data, then you invent a bar chart. And essentially what he wanted to do was to make a timeline visualization that did not collect enough information on Scotland. And so he basically made a segment. So he just made it a timeline, but it was just like a zoomed in component of it. And so when your bar chart becomes popular, you begin to work on more elaborate projects. When you work on more elaborate projects, but still have too little data, then you invent a pie chart. Right? So, and you know, what I would like to point out, I don't know if this is the first instance of the pie chart, but what I would like to point out in the pie chart is that it suffers from sort of canonical failure of the pie chart, which is that it's only good up to a point, and then it starts to sort of eat itself, and so that's very clear here, right? So, from a perspective of someone who you have to imagine you're working on a series of plates that you will condition to produce. You don't have enough data. The plate already has a format and an aspect ratio, and size. You want to take up as much of that plate as you can. So that's why, you know, I'm not saying that's why the pie chart is probably. So the pie chart is one of the least data dense visualizations I've invented. The lack of specificity means that they can be easily generalized and used for just about any data set. And when you can be used for just about any data set, then people use it for just about any data set. So proponents of the pie chart would claim that it has clarity over tabular data. What I would say they're doing is confusing sparseness with clarity, right? I mean, just because you have a label swimming in an open sort of shape does not actually mean that you've got clarity. It just means that you've got sparseness. So the visual system of the pie chart is easy to replicate as an algorithm, meaning that programmers can distill it to an algorithm and essentially bolt it onto every single application. And so that's why I think the pie chart is the equivalent of a virus. It's easy to spread, easy to cache, and bad for you. And when it's been replicated in the software, then what it begins to do to the users of the software is you begin to suffer from this thing called the law of the instrument, which essentially says that whenever the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail, right? And so people will especially, and this goes back to PowerPoint, right? Which is that when you know PowerPoint and PowerPoint spits out column and bar charts, everything gets fitted to column and bar charts, even if it's not appropriate, right? And what happens is you lose data density, right? So to be clear, I'm not saying that every visualization needs to be unique, but it should enhance data, not bind it, right? And I love this quote by Salvador Dali because I think it applies, right? Which is that the first time the bar chart or the pie chart was used, we were a genius. The people who use it after that are probably idiots, and I think that's, I think that's so. Here's some examples: some good, some bad, and some in between, right? So this is a clever use of the viewer's pre-existing knowledge, but it's also problematic in the same way. So this bar chart represents the amount of ink usage for a particular font. And so in that way it's clever because you see that the amount of ink that has drained out is the amount relates to the blackness of the font. The downside, so in that way you're building off of the user's previous knowledge. The bad portion of this graph is that we've been trained when reading bar charts to assume that blackness is the sort of value that we care about, right? So in this case, it's the absence of black that we care about, and so that way it makes it problematic, right? So again, this is what I would consider a very light data density piece because it's beautiful looking, but very little insight is gleaned from it. So this essentially is a visualization that maps the subject matter of 311 calls for a day. I think over a year potentially. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but the problem is once you take time to study this and read about it, you realize, oh, more people complain about traffic congestion during rush hour than they do in the middle of the night. Like that kind of insight is not something that I would expect from having to sort of invest myself in unpacking this graph. This is another one. This is called the ambient orb. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with it. But I call it like the ambivalent orb. The whole idea was that there was this haptic device that you could sort of you could keep in the corner of your eye and would tell you information without actually having to train your entire focus on it. But in one of the examples I gave was like, oh, it will observe the stock market for you. But having my orb move from red to green does not give me enough confidence to know whether I should be buying or selling stock. It's just not. The density of that is not appropriate enough. And I think part of that is because of the context is too large. So if you restrict the context, so this is called the AvailBot. You restrict the context. This is another sort of haptic device. It's something that you can view out of the corner of your eye. I want to see if I can play it because it's fun. this is the part of every presentation that represents where you love the ghost. So this is the available. So even though this is a very simple gesture, I think it's very data dense, partly because of the experience of someone using it. So as Bookson pointed out, you can imagine with everybody here in 2012 having hundreds of people on our contact list, just armies of them falling over today. I buy it. So let's see. All right. So yeah. All right. So this is another good example of what I consider a data dense visualization. Partly because the system takes a little bit of time to sort of unpack and figure out what's going on. This is a spotlight on profitability. So the larger the spotlight, the larger the profit, and then the axis of the other is production cost. So what's nice about this is you can get a real good sense across genre, across films, the overall profitability. But you also, I think, on an intuitive level, I like the idea of the sort of metaphorical connection between a spotlight and it being about the movies, right? So I think that's a very nice implication. So now this is where I get into what I've been calling like pie chart 2012. This is a visualization that Facebook recently did, mapping friends, connections of friends across different countries. And the thing about this is that, first off, the zoom is so far and there's so much going on that the swarm of data becomes, this could be about anything, really. It could be about, tweets back and forth during election night, or air traffic, or tourist patterns, or whatever. Because the components that are highlighted and both hidden, like the center, like who would have thought the middle of Africa wouldn't be connected to Facebook? Like, here's a slide of NASA lights at night, right? I mean, it's just the insight is not really there. So this, I think, is much different, right? Because it's highly contextual. It still swarms the data, but it's actionable. It's real time, and I also think it's actually really incredibly beautiful to actually watch it, right? So I think that in terms of all of the components of a good visualization, it sort of like nails it. And this is the last thing I would say about visualizations is that if your audience is going to, if you're going to give your audience a map or a visualization or whatever, treat them like thinking individuals that don't need to be pandered to. Like really pack it in and give them something to dig into and sort of explore. Like give them a world to sort of discover. Don't try to try to simplify it in the sense that you get rid of components of the narrative people don't care about. But don't simplify it in such a way that you're pandering to the viewer. And that's not to say that all pie charts are bad, right? Menard, everybody's favorite, he uses what I consider a really good use of pie charts, which is when they are contextually laid onto a geography. I think that they become very appropriate visualizations because of the scale and all those things that pie charts are meant to do, right? So I'm going to breeze over these, but essentially, this is the part where we get into user participation. So, Bookson is usually assigning me projects, and today I'm going to call him on to it too. And we're going to do an exercise where we're going to try to do a data dense implementation on the fly. So, the game is going to be played like this. Bookson's going to come here and he's going to draw a mapping device. for navigating the coast of Greenland. And so this will be an object, right? So not just an interface. So this is the only rule is that it must be able to be produced with existing technology. Okay? So the first requirement is it's handheld.
For the whole
Yeah, no, just throw the interface of whatever you imagine you would need to
handle.
Yeah. What's that?
Are we on a boat? Are we on land?
We're just gonna do handheld for now. So okay, so that's the first bit.
That's our handle.
Okay, all right. So the next thing is it's got to be operable at night without environmental load.
So Greenland, we said.
Now it's got to be weather resistant. Yeah, the device is all kind of weather resistant.
Ruggedized.
Yeah. All right. Next has to be language agnostic. So this is about data density. It's about really packing it in.
Language agnostic. All right. I didn't have to.
So this answers the boat question. It should float. You should be able to use it with pins on.
Stylus.
You should be able to use it as a weapon.
With matching switchblade.
All right, must cost less than $1 to manufacture. Yeah. There you go. So this is the killer, right? Is that someone already invented this device hundreds of years ago. Blocks are carved into the leaves to represent the rugged coastline of Greenland towards an island, and essentially they would carry it, and they would use their fingers or within inside of it to be able to sort of locate themselves based on the topography. If they fell overboard, it would float. If someone tried to come aboard, it's fairly sharp. And what I love about this object is that it works on so many different levels, and it's just packed full of possibilities and functionality, but it has absolutely no other embellishments. You know what I mean? It's really just about as data dense an object as we can get. I mean, it's hardware after all. So that's it. Comments, questions, pie charts.
That's the problem. It's almost too big.
Yeah.
There's too many ideas. It's almost hard to narrow it down to a single question. But we got it. Go ahead.
Where did you find that piece of wood from Greenland? Well, not you, but
yeah, the internet. No, I was at a conference at CAP on how first world nations share information, protocols for sharing information, and it just came up in discussion, like just sort of off the cuff, and I went and researched it, found it. It's just like, this is the most awesome thing ever.
Just a quick comment about pie charts.
Yeah.
Let me try to defend for a moment pie charts. I think there is a big difference between. So I really like your example regarding this Facebook visualization. I think there is a huge difference between that example and any other pie charts you've shown in your presentation. The biggest difference there is that. So it's good that we could actually discuss for hours whether pie chart is better than bar chart or whatever you find in the world, okay? But it boils down to the fact that the data behind that, it's very, very small. So it's just a few pieces of data, Okay, you can represent it in 1,000 different ways, but it's gonna be the information content is very small. Okay, but in case of this Facebook representation, that's huge mistake, because you have a data source that potentially includes, I don't know, millions of different interesting pieces of information, and it's clamped all together in something where you cannot get absolutely nothing other than just saying, "Wow, it's cool." It's cool, but it's cool, but I just wanted to point out this.
No, I appreciate that, and you know, it's not my. Tufty does an excellent job savaging pie charts in and of themselves. I agree with you on a lot of the points. The point that I was trying to make with pie charts in general is that oftentimes in programming there's a concept called cargo culting, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but essentially it means you take a system that you don't truly understand and you basically like pull it in and plug it into your own work and just sort of hope that it works. And I think about pie charts. I agree with you; they work fine with limited data sets. But I would say below a certain threshold, it makes sense to just use tabular data. Above a larger threshold, pie chart starts to sort of eat the data. And so you're talking about a visualization that works within a very narrow band. But because it's so easily replicated, it's easily used and used, like it's cargo culted essentially. There are all these different applications, and it's sort of what I feel sort of thumbs down visualization.
Well, I just want to speak to that same point, because it seems like a lot of the visualizations you're talking about deal with a specific range of data, where you have too much data to convey in any kind of reasonable time frame, any kind of clarity in tabular form. But it's very difficult to actually convey a message or a narrative to the people we're talking to, but you also want them to have available to them when they actually get into it, multiple different layers, multiple different conclusions that you come to about the data. And I think that's a particular range of data that you're dealing with, where you want people to be able to take a look at this visualization and, of course, come to a conclusion, which is the point of any data visualization, but also be able to look at it and come to more and more conclusions up to a point where they're studying that. I'm not sure, that's a pretty large range, fair, but I think that there are spaces beneath that and above that where the particular philosophy here of espousing, I think, is sort of less possible.
I mean, I'm not going to say that it's a cherry pick the examples that sort of help my point, but what I I'm not, and I also think that like I said earlier, that lots of visualizations can exist just fine with pie charts, column charts, and line charts, and what have you. And there's a rich history about proving that point. The point that I was trying to make was that if you consider that as edge of the world, the world's flat, and that's where there's dragons on the other side of that, then you limit the overall possibilities. And that's why I really like things like B3, because what it does is it gives you a semantic framework, a language to basically sketch with, as opposed to, I mean, it's the equivalent of saying this, you can have whatever movie you want, but Arnold Schwarzenegger has to play every role. I mean, that's essentially what you're getting with a lot of the charting libraries. It's like you can bring whatever data you want as long as it fits within the parameters that we define. And that's why I like B3.
The other example is when you bring in some of the Google Maps or something, where you have different, it's actually drawn differently based on what you wrote. So at one level, you have the information that's much relevant at that level, and you zoom in. I think that's
definitely. Context is key.
I think you hit on an interesting point with the wire map showing the 311 call, in the sense that I think oftentimes there's different contexts for use of visualizations, right? And it's not always sense making that's the ultimate goal. Sometimes it's just sort of a playful entertainment,
USA
artistic kind of thing. I think particularly for those kinds of visualizations, people sort of get a kick out of seeing something that they expect to be there. It's sort of like the, oh yeah, oh okay, yeah, sure. There's noise complaints at night.
Right.
Taxis, taxis are complaining during rush hour, right?
But it's like chewing a piece of chewing gum. It's like good for 30 seconds, and you get the flavor, but then it's chewing rubber. And that's
Right, it's celebrity news, it's scandal. I mean, but that's sort of just a feature of human attention. Like,
Yeah.
you like to look at that stuff and feel like, oh yeah, I saw this thing that I sort of expected to be there, but it's still appealing to me because I just encountered it in mail.
Yeah. I agree. Thank you, guys.
So thank you all for coming. Thanks to our fantastic speakers, all three of them. Thanks again to McKinsey & Company for giving us this great venue and some nice munchies. We couldn't do it without our speakers and without our event hosts. And we couldn't do it without all of you coming. There's so many fascinating people in this audience. A couple of the leading lights of data visualization are hiding in the audience. I'm not going to name them, but they're here. And so introduce yourself. Stick around. Meet the other people who are here. Take advantage of the refreshments that are still available. And send ideas. Share your ideas for presentations. Let us know what you do, what you would like to talk about in the future. And we'll keep this thing going on a regular basis. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.